Quarantillo with SportsbookReview.com. I'm your host, Lee Martin, here to talk UFC Fight Night, Michelle Waterson versus Angela Hill. Here I am with my speech impediment. Joining me today, I have MMA Mania's lead host, Matt Ryan. But before we get into all the good, juicy stuff for the main card breakdown, go ahead, give us a like and subscribe to our channel. That way you never miss a show. Now, let's get to it. How are you today, Matt?
Doing good. Today's one of those days you mark on the calendar. It's a solemn one, but it's good to be reminded that the fights are coming up, and it's great to be here with you. Sucks that we don't have Dave here with us, but the internet gods were not on his side this week. But I'm here, and if you need a redhead to yell at about your picks, that's me. You yell at me and yell at my notes.
Great. Well, before we get into the main card breakdown for this week's fight, I just want to go back to last week with Overeem versus Sakai and just want to hear how your weekend went with the fights.
Well, better than Sakai's. Like, I walked out with all my ribs. I didn't look like I was sliced and diced and put through a Vegematic. Alistair Overeem at 40 is more frightening now than ever, and this is a man who retired ostensibly. Brock Lesnar dominated in Pride, and at 40, the man can still knock people out, can still cause so much damage. If you look back to the Rosenstruik fight, he was dominating up until the final seconds. This fight was no different, and Sakai joins the long list of top fighters who have fell into the machine that is Alistair Overeem. He wants Rosenstruik again. He wants a title fight again. The UFC heavyweight division for the first time since the Lesnar era is very deep, is very entertaining, and very intriguing. I may not like who's the heavyweight champion just because I like Daniel Cormier so much, but, you live, you learn, and give me Overeem and John Jones. I'm calling it now. Sean Shelby, Mick Maynard, make that fight happen. I will throw my wallet at the internet if that fight happens. But, it's good to see Reem continue to dominate and decimate all on his path.
For sure. I always forget that he's also 40 years old. So That's something that's amazing to me. Now, let's move on to this week. We're back at the UFC Apex for a fight night on Saturday, September 12th. Let's start off with the main card breakdown. We're going to start off with featherweight Billy Quarantillo versus Kyle Nelson. Via Bet Online, if I can find his name, Quarantillo is minus 257 and Nelson is plus 217. Matt, can you give us your breakdown and pick for that fight?
Well, that line kind of makes sense to me. Billy Quarantillo with the most unfortunate name during 2020. That's the most 2020 anti-name we could probably think up unless it's like COVID Corona Jones V. But Quarantillo walking into this fight with 7 straight wins, his last one coming at the Woodley Burns card a few months ago where he beat Spike Carlisle. He's got 6 wins by knockout or TKO, which helps him inside #babycage. And Kyle Nelson, he's 13-3, but he's lost 2 of his 3 career losses in his last 3 fights. He's 1-2 in his last 3. His last win is around this time last year in 2019 at UFC Mexico City when he defeated Paulo Reyes. And he had a 6-fight win streak before that. This one's going to be a situation to where Nelson needs to really step up and have that winning streak kind of bounce back. But he's got 5 wins by knockout, 4 by submission, and 4 by decision. He had a 6-fight win streak that happened before he entered the UFC. So if you're looking at leveling up against competition for Kyle Nelson, once he walked into the UFC, he's gone 1-3. So that makes it really hard to kind of gauge his ceiling because he's not been able to get consistent wins. For me, Quarantillo is the favorite. I would take him. And if we're looking at everything here, he's not been submitted inside the octagon, Quarantillo. He's been knocked out once. He's only had 1 loss by decision in his pro career. And you look, both of these guys getting stoppage wins fairly consistently. I'm looking at this at Quarantillo inside the distance.
So there we have it. If you guys want to get in on that fight, again, via Bet Online, Quarantillo is minus 257 and Nelson's plus 217. Let's move on to the next fight. We have light heavyweight Ed Herman versus Mike Rodriguez. Via Bet Online, Rodriguez is minus 230 and Herman is plus 195. Matt, again, your breakdown and pick for that fight.
Both of these guys are coming in with some interesting last 4s or last 5s. Ed Herman 2-3. He is the underdog walking into this fight. His last win was in November of 2019 against Khadis Ibragimov. He's on a 2-fight winning streak, which serves him well. I botched that name completely, but we're going to move on. Mike Rodriguez is 2-1-1 in his last 4. His last win coming 13 months ago against Marcin Prashino in August. Pardon me, this past August. Knocked out in his last loss in December. So his last 2 fights, he's gone 1-1, but he's not a bad fighter. He's going up against an Ed Herman who's been in the UFC longer than I think pretty much anybody at light heavyweight. He's one of the longest tenured UFC fighters, having multiple runs with the promotion. But he is on a 2-fight winning streak. He can go all 3 rounds. He's got 5 wins by decisions in his career. He's not had a winning streak extend past 2 wins since 2011. Since 2011. That was when he had a 3-fight winning streak. Since then, in the past 9 years, he's been very streaky. He's been getting 2-win winning streaks, 1 win, 1 loss, a couple of losses in a row. He's not been able to matriculate wins to my liking. So I would probably go with Rodriguez here because Herman is the older fighter. He's a streakier fighter, and he might not be able to maintain that level of consistency heading into the rest of 2020.
All right, well, there you guys have it again via Bet Online. Mike Rodriguez is -230, and Ed Herman is +195. Let's move on to the next because of Flyweight. Women's Flyweight, Roxanne Modafferi versus Andrea Lee. Via Bet Online, Lee is -310 and Modafferi is +260. And I do not mean myself when I say Lee, but Matt, can you give us your breakdown and pick for that women's fight?
So this one's going to be one of the more interesting fights on this card because of Roxanne Modafferi. Modafferi is one of the most popular fighters, not only in the women's flyweight division, but in the UFC. She's just beloved for her love of anime, her overexpressive personality. She's just an endearing fighter to root for. But she is someone who, as we talked about with Ed Herman, is streaky. She's 3-3. She's at 500 in her last 6 fights. Her last fight coming in June, against Lauren Murphy, where she got a loss. But also Andrea Lee has a loss to that common opponent in Lauren Murphy, that fight back in February. But since then, Lee's been able to bounce back on a 2-fight winning streak. But prior to a loss to Joanne Calderwood, she was on a 7-fight winning streak. Lee has had a pretty successful run so far as a mixed martial artist, has not been knocked out yet inside the octagon, but we have seen Modafferi stop hype trains before, stop capable opponents before, such as Macy Barber, back at UFC 246, and also last April defeated Antonina Shevchenko, one of the dangerous Shevchenko sisters. So right then and there, Modafferi has the tools. She's got 2 wins by knockout, 4 by submission, 5 by decision. So if she's not able to open up a submission there against Andrea Lee, 15 wins by decision, 5 by submission, 4 wins by knockout. Those stats I just told were for Lee. I'm going to put my notes closer to my face so I can read. I'm an old man, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not, hip. I'm not with it. I look like a goalie coach. But when you look at the records between Modafferi and Lee, I want to root for Roxanne Modafferi, but you look at the way Lee's been growing the past couple of fights, even though she has a loss to a common opponent, I'm thinking it's going to be Lee. I think this one's going to be a decision because Modafferi is a fighter who can go all 15 minutes, is consistent for 15 minutes, but sometimes cannot pick up the momentum enough to drive the victory home. I would love to see Roxy win. Everybody roots for Roxy, but when you're throwing your wallet at the internet, you may want to, if you're going to select this fight, if you're going to pick a winner here, I would go with Lee. I would take it by a decision.
All right. So I personally would probably avoid this fight just because of how juiced it is, or you can add it to a parlay piece. But again, via Bet Online, Andrea Lee is -310. Roxanne Modafferi is +260.
Yeah, those odds to me, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off here, but when you look at those odds, this is a stay. For me, either way, this is a stay away fight because all the stats I just threw at you guys, there's a lot there to break down. There's a lot to look at. And if Dave was watching, he'd probably agree with both of us that this fight, not the easiest to pick, not the easiest to look at. And once you read those stats back to me, they're juiced up like Barry Bonds in 04. Stay away.
Yes. Allegedly. But I do like Lee for that fight, so I agree with you on that, Matt. Okay, so let's move on to the next fight. This is a fight I'm really looking forward to. We have lightweight Ottman Azaitar versus Khama Worthy. Azaitar is +110 and Worthy is -130. Matt, I'd love to hear what you have to say. Can you give us your breakdown and pick for that fight?
All right, not only is this a fight that's going to be exciting to watch, it's got the 2 best names of anybody else on this card. Roosevelt Brown in the prelims is close, but come on, Ottman going up against Khama. This is perfect. You throw that in the Wu-Tang name generator, you're going to have yourself a fairly good time this coming Saturday night, even with the fight. This is Ottman's second appearance inside the UFC. He's 12-0 as a professional fighter, walking in undefeated, remaining undefeated in his first 2 UFC fights, as we saw with other fighters on this card. It is not an easy task unless, Mick Maynard and Sean Shelby make it an easy task, but this one isn't, because he's going up against a solid fighter in Khama Worthy, who's on a 7-fight winning streak, including his first 2 UFC fights. These 2 guys have the goods. They know how to back it up, and they've proven it in their first 2 fights inside the UFC. It's going to be, I think, the biggest test for either fighter. We saw Ottman in his first appearance, in his last fight, in a first-round knockout win over Timu Pakalin. And then we saw Khama Worthy submit Luis Pena in June and then knock out Devontae Smith last August. So these are 2 fighters who are willing to bring the fight and have faced against quality fighters before. Let's take a look at this. Worthy's been knocked out 5 times. That's a dangerous stat. When you've been knocked out or you've gotten a TKO loss 5 of your 6 wins in your career, that's a dangerous stat. But the deeper this fight goes for Worthy, it's going to be better, because if you look at the stats, Worthy has never lost a fight by decision. So the odds are forever in his favor to go to the 3rd round, to make this fight go to the distance, because as the fight gets deeper, he can get a better understanding of the fight, and he knows how to pick up points, and he knows how to get a victory. But then you look at Ottman, and he's got 9 TKO or KO victories. That makes up for 2/3 of his wins as a professional, coming by way of knockout or TKO. This is his toughest challenge to date, but as we've seen, Khama's got a bit of he doesn't have the full chin on him. He doesn't have the Jay Leno chin. He does have a sharp chin, but one that can be decimated over time, like one of those Q*bert bricks. You just keep jumping on it and jumping on it and jumping on it. You're able to get through. For me, I'm going to take Ottman. I'm going to take it by a finish, and it's either going to come within that first 5 minutes of the first round, or we're going to see something big happen in round number 3.
Very interesting. Well, if you guys do want to get in on that fight, again, Worthy is -130 and Azaitar is +110. Now let's head over to the main event. We have women's strawweight, Michelle Waterson, the karate hottie, versus Angela Hill. Via Bet Online, Hill is -125 and Waterson is +105. Matt, can you give us your breakdown and pick for that fight?
This one is obvious. It's a main event for a reason. It's the best fight on this card. It's the most interesting fight in this card, but also a fight it's difficult to pick because you want to root for both fighters. Both have great stories. Both are endearing and engaging personalities, which is something that plays heavy for me. It may not play heavy for a lot of people, but when you look at Michelle Waterson and Angela Hill, these are 2 fighters that the UFC desperately want to be successful because they're looking to build up their women's roster. It's not the Ronda Rousey days. It's not 3 fighters that are up to par and then a whole bunch of development stories. These are solid fighters with solid records. And you look at Angela Hill, 12-8, Michelle Waterson, 17-8. These are both very experienced fighters, but also coming off of losses. Angela Hill coming off a loss to Claudia Gadelha, which was a little bit of a conflicting fight. It looked like Hill was winning that fight. It's interesting how they gave that to Gadelha. Her last win came up against Lormer Lukabunme a few months ago. Joseph Gomez in the chat saying Waterson can't get a decision to save her life. That's fairly true. When you look at Waterson's last 2 fights, losses to Joanna Jędrzejczyk, former champion, and Carla Esparza. Last 6 fights have all gone to decision for Michelle Waterson. And in a main event fight, I do believe this is a 3-round fight, not a 5-round fight. I think you may want to confirm that for me. But if this is a 25-minute fight for Waterson, that's going to be a bit tricky. That's going to be a bit of a problem. But when you look at if it's 3 rounds, if it's 15 minutes, it's a safer bet for Waterson, because even though Joseph Gomez says she can't get a decision, she's been able to prove time and time again that she's able to go the entire 3 rounds. You look at her last finish as a fighter came up against the bare knuckle sensation, Paige Van Zandt, and that was 6 years ago, 2014 or 2016. It's been long enough to where Waterson may not have that 3rd gear in her. Angela Hill does. Angela Hill has yet to be knocked out. She's got 2 losses by submission and 6 decision losses, 5 wins by knockout, 7 wins by submission. She has not won a decision yet as a professional fighter. That is a bit worrisome, But as Joseph Gomez said, Waterson may not be able to get a decision for her life. It's in Vegas. It's all predicated on the judges. There's so much fakakta stuff that can go down in this fight. But when you look at Hill, she's angry coming off of that loss to Gadea. She wants to prove that she belongs in the upper echelon of this division. This fight for Waterson is a fight whether or not she's a challenger or a gatekeeper, and she definitely does not want to be looked at as a gatekeeper of this division. And you see fighters like Betch Kohea nearing retirement who were considered at one point top contenders for the title when Ronda Rousey was on top, but now playing that gatekeeper role. And Waterson is edging closer and closer and closer. So not only because this is a main event, but also because what this means for either fighter's career. This is a high-pressure fight, and it's all about how they handle pressure. And when you saw Waterson fall to Joanna Jędrzejczyk and fall to Carla Esparza under the bright lights against major competitors, she has wilted, but it's by decision, and it comes down to the judges. But for me, if I'm looking at this fight, Angela Hill has more of the momentum. Angela Hill has the ability to say polysyllabic words very fast, unlike me, and Angela Hill is going to get this victory on Saturday night.
All right, and I double-checked because I thought it is 5 rounds. So do you think it'll go to decision, or do you think it'll be in the distance?
With Hill never winning a decision, I think the 4th and 5th rounds are going to be very telling. Hill has a better gas tank, I think, than Waterson, even though Waterson has gone to the 15-minute round part 3 times. It's how they deal in deep water. It goes back to that conversation I just had with myself about whether or not the decisions or the gas tank or that momentum will propel them. I think once they get inside deep water, I think it's going to be easier for Hill. Mm-hmm. I think Waterson may get caught up in the moment just a little bit and leave herself a bit too open, or she's just going to think about surviving that last 10 minutes. Yep. So they might be playing safer baseball. I think if Hill opens herself up in that 4th round, it's over. But Waterson's going to try to stay the course. It's going to probably be into the 4th and 5th rounds, lesser output, and Hill's going to try to maximize the output. So for me, it's going to be Hill. I'm thinking I don't think it's going to be a decision. I do believe it's going to be a stoppage, but it may come in those 4th and 5th rounds.
Yep, I love Michelle Waterson, but for this fight, I'm definitely backing up Hill. So if you guys do want to get in on the main event, again, via Bet Online, Hill is -125 and Waterson is +105. Now, there was an extra fight added onto the card. It'd be lightweight Bobby Green versus Alan Patrick. Matt, I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but if you guys do want to read up more about this fight, you can head on over to sbrpicks.com/UFC. But Matt, before I get into the comments, I just wanted to ask you if there is a prelim fight that you're looking out for.
Yeah, the main event, quote unquote, of the prelim card. You want to look at Julia Avila versus Sijara Eubanks. This fight, I believe, was canceled a few weeks ago, and we broke it down right here on SBR on our YouTube channel, so you can go deep into the archives and see when that see our thoughts on that fight. Just take a look here. We were supposed to have this fight.
Last week, I think.
It was supposed to be last week, and it got last week or 2 weeks ago. But that fight is probably the one you're going to want to look at. It's the prelim card on here is not as stacked, but you see a lot of young prospects on this card. You've got Brock Weaver, Jalen Turner, Alexander Romanov, and Roosevelt Roberts are fighting on this card. Romanov, a heavyweight, going up against Roque Martinez. Roosevelt Roberts walking in 10-2 against the well sought out veteran Kevin Kroom, and I say well sought out because he's got a 21-12 record. The dude likes to fight. And we've got Brian Barberena on this card. If you're looking to do something on a Saturday night, the prelims are going to be a nice little sneaky watch for you guys, and it will be an interesting way for you to take a look at some of the guys the UFC are probably developing. It may not be worth throwing some shekels now, but down the line, you see these fights, you see them build up their careers. The best thing about the prelims, aside from the fact that it's an excuse to get away from people and say, I got to work, I got to watch fights. It's a great way for you to understand some of the talent that the UFC are bringing forth and making an argument for these to be main card fights. This Eubanks fight was a main card fight a couple of weeks ago, but now you look at how sneakily stacked this card is for Saturday night. You can make the argument that it may not belong there. It's all about, standing, what's going on in the card. And honestly, I'm looking forward to the fights this weekend. The main card, obviously, world's better than the prelim, but there are some sneaky fights there on the prelims that you may want to look at for a parlay, may want to look at for just future research.
So I do want to talk to you about the Eubanks fight because Sijara Eubanks is like one of my most favorite fighters. Their pricing right now, Avila is -280 and Eubanks is +240. Do you think that Eubanks do you find value in her, or do you think Avila can get that fight?
I think Avila can get the fight. That line is, I think, a little it's a little juicier than I would have liked. But if you're looking at Eubanks to kind of steal a victory tomorrow night, I would definitely lay a little bit down because the odds are a little too good to be true. But yet again, I'm some fat jerk from Brooklyn. You can take my advice as far as it can go. Yes, of course, I'm an expert. I'm smart. I have an NYU diploma somewhere. I don't know. It's somewhere in the East River. But when you want to look at how this fight goes down, check back at our previous breakdown of this fight. But Eubanks may be a sneaky little underdog bet to take. Maybe throw that in a parlay. I saw somebody in the chat talking about going with a Quarantillo Barberena parlay. Maybe throw Eubanks in there, see if you can make a little bit more money.
Yeah. Now, let's get into the comments real quick. I'm just going to give everyone a little shout out. Gabriel Katz, you're always in here, so shout out to Gabriel Katz. He said Matt is a very funny guy. Yes.
Thank you. You're a sweetheart.
Joseph Gomez also said Lee inside the distance. So refresh us, Matt. Did you say for that fight the Lee and Daffy fight?
I have Lee getting the win. Actually, no. Let me take a look at my notes here just to remind myself. It's been a long day, folks. When we're looking at the Modafferi, I've got Lee winning by decision. I don't have to see this fight being a stoppage. I see Modafferi going the entire way. But I think that it's certainly going to be a close fight. I think the possibility of Lee winning inside the distance is probable. But just looking at the amount of times I've seen Roxy fight, it's going to be Lee, but it's going to be by decision.
Joseph Gomez also asked, isn't Ed Herman 45 by now? I'm pretty sure he's only 39, if I'm not mistaken.
But that's an MMA 72.
Yeah, good point.
That's the interesting thing about modern MMA, because you see Daniel Cormier, he's 40, and then like Tito Ortiz, like a decade ago, was 37. You're like, what the hell happened in 10 years? How is training and development? Is it a wrestling thing? Even though Tito was I don't know what it is. I don't know if Valco's involved. Somebody get the cream and the clear. I don't know, but it's been an interesting decade in terms of UFC fighter development. We look back at when Randy Couture won the UFC heavyweight title at 40, and we look at even in boxing, we go back 25 years ago to when George Foreman won the world heavyweight title at 40 or in his mid-40s. And now we're seeing across combat sports, fighters fighting into their late 30s, early 40s, finding their prime in their 40s. Like we saw Daniel Cormier become one of the greatest combat sports athletes of all time between the ages of 36 and 41, and putting on a performance at 40 and 41 against a 37-year-old Stipe Miocic. And even that, like you look at how fighters have aged so harshly in prior generations, and it could just be the evolution of the sport, the evolution of training and athleticism. It could be Cthulhu. We don't know. We don't have an answer for it, but it lies somewhere in the middle. But it is interesting to see Ed Herman, who is a MMA 72 because he's had more fights than Boxcar Mo. It's an interesting thing. I said interesting too much.
Definitely. No, but combat and MMA definitely is a wear and tear in the body, so that probably explains everything. But Gabriel Katz, I'm pretty sure this is in regards to the Waterson and Hill fight. He said looks like a close decision.
It could be. It could be a close decision. It could be. I feel like Waterson's going to be in deep water here heading into 5 rounds. Mm-hmm. I don't know if she's going to be able to maintain that momentum, maintain that edge, especially against a fighter like Hill, who got robbed in that Gadea fight. We can all say she got robbed in that Gadea fight, and now she's just coming for blood, and she doesn't want the judges to decide this one.
Yep. And also, Matt, this is in reference to you. Berto Genesis says this guy is amazing. So good job, Matt.
Thank you. I'm not, but thank you. Saying all the things my mother never told me.
Oh my gosh. So that's all that we have for the fight card for Waterson versus Hill. We did our main card breakdown and dabbled in some prelims. If you want to follow Matt on Twitter, you can give him a follow at MRyan Consulting. And since Dave is not here and you guys want to read what his picks are, his analysis, you can follow him on Twitter at @dmanyun_, and also go to sprpicks.com/UFC. You can find more UFC analysis and breakdowns and picks there. All right. Well, again, that's everything for this weekend. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Best of luck to you all. And thank you, Matt, for dropping some knowledge and joining me today. So I'll see you guys next week.